Hi everyone, welcome back to the garden. I wanted to give a late winter update on some of my more arid and experimental planting. As regular viewers will know, here at the far end of my garden is my ongoing fire pit project. Ongoing being the crucial word there, because it's taken a while, but there will be some real progress in spring. Today though, there's weeds, there's rubble, there's mud, there's everything, so you just have to see past that. But as we're nearing the end of winter, I wanted to give an update on how some of my arid and the more Mediterranean plants are actually doing. Yes, in theory, they can take deep cold and they can actually survive our wet winters, even up here in North Lincolnshire. But without giving them full-on protection in winter, without giving them rain covers and all sorts of unsightly shelters, can they actually make it through winter? Well, as you'll see, we've got mixed results here. But I think the most crucial thing to say is, I planted these last year, knowing that this first winter will be a test. So before I finish the hard landscaping and essentially lock those plants in, it's actually been really good to have a wet winter with some cold spells to really test these plants. And as you'll see, some of them have come through without a problem, others, well, it's not gone quite so well. But as always, this video, I'm going to look at the good, the bad, and definitely the ugly. So let's get going. So as we head down my Mediterranean section here, where the garden gets sunnier, more exposed, you'll see a lot of these plants look great, but a lot of these plants really are incredibly hardy. Jabea chilensis, the Chilean wine palm, a fantastic plant that can cope with wet winters as long as it's given good drainage, and here it's raised up so it looks pretty fantastic. As you see, the Dasylyrian, that's come through well, and those Trachycarpus there, those are planted as very small little plants, but now 3.5 years on and they're really starting to motor away. Fascicularia, bromeliads, again, they've done great, but they are very, very tough, hardy. They're grass type plants, but they're actually bromeliads, which have a very serrated edge to them. But the main reason you grow these is for those beautiful sort of alien-like inflorescences in summer. Reds and blues, they really are unusual looking things. But again, no problem at all. So this area, I have done a bit of juggling round. As you can see, I've trimmed the Pinus patula back a little bit. I've actually done a little bit of weeding at some point, which might surprise you. I've spread the sedums around a little bit more, and it's a more stripped back look at this time of year. But in another month or so, I'll be giving the whole border a nice tidy, get rid of the weeds, put some more sharp sand down as a mulch on top, and it will really look great once we start to have those sunny spring days. Here, Euphorbia pasteurii, John Phillips, I mean, fantastic. Look at this plant. It really is one of the best exotic evergreens you can grow if you want a Mediterranean garden, an exciting exotic garden, or you just simply like evergreens and have a sunny, well-drained spot. Here in my garden, this fantastic plant, it really helps to tie the Mediterranean area in with the more lush jungle planting beyond. And at the back there, just moving gracefully in the breeze, is my Pinus patula, the Mexican weeping pine. A beautiful plant, a very fast growing tree, and I'm starting to really enjoy the look it's going to give this area. But anyway, let's get on to the main subject, arid plants and how well they've done. As you can see there, the weeds are definitely popping up now the weather's getting milder. So a good afternoon will be needed to get on top of those, get some more sand and gravel down. The palms generally look pretty good, no problems there, as you'd expect given that we haven't had any really cold temperatures this year. To give some context, we had about -5 before Christmas, another cold spell afterwards. But other than that, the main feature of this winter has been the rain, which is these plants' worst enemy. A lot of these yuccas, arid plants, they can handle cold, but they don't like wet cold. And living in the UK, especially up here in North Lincolnshire, wet cold is pretty much what's on the menu for half the year. So let's see how they've done. Looking at this side then, Agave avatifolia. This one here, along with the other agaves you'll see, only had a bit of overhead cover for the coldest spell. Other than that, it's been left to it, because although I could protect each and every plant here, long term that's not my plan. So I thought I'd set off how I plan to continue, see how they do. Every leaf looks intact, you can't complain at that. Behind it, my most experimental or zone pushing palm, this is the Butiagris eriuspatha or eriuspatha. A beautiful, almost coconut type palm. What I did was basically erect those bamboo canes there. Definitely very, very low tech protection. I put the canes up and then I wrapped the actual plant itself in fleece and used a fleece bag over the top of it. So that way the actual leaves aren't touching the outside fleece. You keep the frost off the plant. No heated protection. That plant is worth a little bit of care, but at this end of the garden, no plant gets heated protection. So this is all about an exotic look without going to extreme measures to protect everything. And let's just have a quick look around it. As you can see, most of the yuccas, they look good. Particular highlight is this hybrid yucca from Hardy Palms. That is a mixture between Yucca linearis and Yucca traculiana, so potentially a very beautiful, fast-growing tree yucca. I'm excited to see how well that one grows. Unlike, unfortunately, the first casualty here. This is my Yucca Folifera australis, and I should say, me and this plant, we have a bit of history. At our old house, I planted one of these out, and it did exactly the same as this. It rotted through. These plants here, they're all raised up. Yes, it is mostly soil with some grit for the top. We'll say foot 300 mil, something like that. So the drainage is relatively good. But at this end of the garden here, it's a bit of a frost pocket, and where we live, the sort of humid fog does tend to linger in winter. So I think ultimately, rather than being a plant that's been killed by the cold, it's definitely the moisture that's got to it. And for me, this is the second time I've tried this, and I probably won't give it a third attempt. Now, potentially, if I left this, would it sprout back from the base? It might do, but in all honesty, I mean, that's gone, hasn't it? That's completely gone. So it's a shame. This was really my centerpiece, one of the most alien-looking plants that I grow in this area of the garden, but it's not made it. So that really is a little bit gutting. Yes, I know I could have protected it and maybe kept it growing, but as I said before, I don't mean this in a callous, uncaring or, you know, completely irresponsible way, but that's not how I want to treat the plants at this end of the garden. And this is a plant which in theory can take brutal cold and in theory can take winter wet. But here in my garden, especially this winter, it's pushed it too far. But looking on the bright side, it's opened up a fantastic opportunity for a centerpiece plant, so let me know your ideas. I don't have a load of money to spend, but I have still got a few palms looking for a space in the garden, so watch this space. Heading around this way, we'll just ignore my spring projects lined up in front of me. As you can see, a couple of pots got broken over Christmas, but they're all going in the hard car. So over this side then, like I said, palms look fantastic. Today is a pretty grey, miserable day, but really, when you come out here and see them in the winter sun, they just look beautiful. The fantastic silver fronds of Cerifera there, the lush olive green Vulcano in the back, and then my huge Djibouti palm, they really do look special in winter. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting this area really developed and enjoying it throughout the year. This plant here is the Yucca gloriosa citrus twist. Not a problem at all. A couple of the low leaves got some marking, but that's to be expected. I can simply chop those off, and this plant really is a star. I've got to say it was a little bit of a, well, I won't say risk because that's exactly the opposite, but I could have had a really special plant here. Some really half-hardy, tender agave, something like that. But you can probably guess the results that would have happened this year. Whereas going for this plant here, I know it's not the rarest or the hardest plant to grow, but it just looks amazing, it's fantastic. So I think, yes, whilst there is an element of, you know, pushing the boundaries of what you can grow where you are, you can still have an exciting garden with an exotic, arid or Mediterranean twist without every plant being a risk. And that one, it really is a stunner. Especially now as that sun comes out, just look at those colours. Beautiful lemon stripe in there. That plant, highly recommended. That sun's actually bright, isn't it? What a treat. Here then, we've got some more yuccas. And in front of them, we've got an agave, that's a Parrii. Now, apparently these are one of the hardest agaves, and I do believe that. As you can see, it's got some marking, which I could have potentially avoided with an overhead cover, if again, that's what I was going to do. It's made it through, and I'd like to think it will continue growing, and it will outgrow that damage throughout the year, but a bit of a shame, but unfortunately, we have had an incredibly wet winter, and I think probably the other factor is a lot of these plants are quite small, whereas larger examples could potentially have shrugged off the cold significantly easier. At the back there, Yucca rostrata, that's more of a green form, no problems there. And here, as that plane drones overhead, we've got a Yucca thomsoniana. Looks a bit rough around the base, but it did when I got it. As you can see at the top, no problem at all. Here again, we've got another Agave Parrii. I think that one's a var Parrii or subspecies Parrii. Again, it's got some blemishes to it, which is a shame, but overall the plant will come through. And as you can see there, it's got a tiny little offset, that's growing away. So the plants will survive. Did they look perfect? No. But despite this whole bed being south facing, raised up, and we'll say probably best part of a metre of gravel. I've done everything I can. I do still live in North Lincolnshire and we are still quite rural. So this part of the garden, although I've put in the best efforts that I can to give these plants a long-term spot, it's not ideal, it's far from optimal, and this part of the garden really is experimental. But if you live in a central city location, if you've got somewhere close to your house where a brick wall can give it the extra bit of protection from the cold and rain, something like this really will be a great shot at long-term success for a medium-sized agave. Yucca linearis or linearifolia, probably one of the hardiest yuccas we can grow here, certainly one of the most beautiful, no problems at all. That's done fantastic. Heading through a little bit more, watching my step. At the back there, we've got my Nalina. That one has come through. I mean, at the bottom, you can probably see where that grass is pushing through. Some of the older leaves definitely look brown, but overall that plant is as healthy as I'd like it to look. It really is fantastic and it's come through no problem at all. Here, we've got the Brahea armata, the Mexican Hesper or blue palm. That one, it looks rough going in. It was definitely a last-ditch effort, but it's not looking any worse than it did last year, so that's a positive. And really, this plant, I'd like to hope it's got a chance of survival. I'd like to hope that now it's got its roots into the ground, it'll come back without a problem. If it doesn't, I've done everything I can for it. I've given it a sunny spot. Fingers crossed for that one. But looking over here, we'll see another Avatifolia. Now, again, you'll really have to ignore all the weeds here because they're quite plentiful, but the joys of living in the countryside next to all the gardens that are full of weeds, they get everywhere. This Avatifolia, it's gone. And I mean, you can probably see there, that top is completely mushy. It's simply not made it. So whether it's because this one here hasn't got as much grit dug in, it's very, very raised. We're about, we'll say, best part of a metre above ground level here. Unfortunately, even being south facing, raised up, the ground tilted a little bit, it's not enough to keep this one alive. So I think probably one of the take-home points in this video, if there are such things, is that you really have to experiment with maybe more than one of a plant before you draw conclusions. The Folifera is something I've tried a couple of times and I've had the same results, so I know where things are now. This Avatifolia, if I just had this plant here, I would be feeling very downbeat and negative about the plant in general. But if I had the one up that end of the garden, I'd be feeling a lot more optimistic. So it really is one of those games where if you're going to be experimental, try different positions, microclimates in your garden. One that might come through, another one might end up like this. But for the one that makes it, it is absolutely worth it. Disappointing, but again, as always, that silver lining of there being room for another plant here is always there for us exotic gardeners. Here you see the Kniphofia northii, which look incredibly like an aloe with this evergreen, strappy, sort of jellyfish-like foliage, if that's the phrase. I think these are incredible. As you can see, they look very much like the aloe or Aleompilus, or whatever they call it now, Stratula. They've got a very similar look. So for a plant which flowers, has magnificent blooms, very, very tough, very hardy, these, again, highly recommended. I just think they're such a cool, unique looking plant. Up there, big Darzulirion. It always looks a little bit ropey, a little bit of a black edge in some of the leaves, but overall it's come through, not a problem, and it's hopefully now settling in. This one was one of the first ones to get planted last spring, so I'd like to think now that one, yeah, it should have its roots down, and we're looking forward to bigger and better things with it. This aloe in spring, I'll be taking this head off and using it as a cut-in to plant further back, but this one again has come through. This is a plant I've had mixed success with in the past. Sometimes I've made it. After last winter, 2022 to 23, one of them died completely. So they're not quite as bulletproof hardy as you'd like them to be, but overall this year it's come through really well. This side is more mixed planting and weeds. But as we push through, majestic eucalyptus, there'll definitely be some pruning going on this spring. Here you'll see they've actually planted lots of alliums at the back end last year. Farmer Gracie had one there, famous sales, so I took advantage and I think it cost me about a tenner. I got loads of different alliums. So later on in spring, you'll see those really bringing some purple vibrancy to the area. Euphorbia there, Some of these white euphorbias, there's a few different forms available. They really are tough and hardy. So if you've got a Mediterranean garden, or you simply want some exciting, unusual, drought-tolerant plants, maybe you want a garden that's very low maintenance and high impact, these are very highly recommended again. Yucca rostratus here, 3 of them, they all look pristine, no problems whatsoever. So these are a plant which for me, very reliably hardy. Linearis is undoubtedly tougher again on paper, which is why in gardens further up in Scotland, as I've heard from one of you guys, Linearis is the option, whereas these rostrata can't make it. But if you live further south than me, if you live in a mild coastal or city location, then there's other sorts of yucca, such as Rigida, or Rigida, I don't know how you pronounce it, that offer a slightly more alien blue colour, but aren't quite as tough and hardy as these. So there's plenty of options of exciting yuccas for people willing to experiment. Here you can see a few more rostratas, and this garden I think this year will really come together. Blue swan over there, very sort of silvery blue colouring. That one, it really is a stunner. This is one that I brought from the old house, potted, again a beautiful yucca. Got the brown grasses and other Niphofias helping to break them up, and I hope really convey that sort of arid Mediterranean desert style planting. And in the middle, got more alliums which are bursting through now and ready to flower away in spring. But the reason why I've come up here is to share this with you. This is a rostrata that, like the one you've just seen, has been in a pot for many years. But coming out here one winter day, I noticed all these leaves on the floor. And if you look in here, get ready for this, this isn't good. It is, I don't know if it shows well on the camera, completely hollow. So this yucca is a bit of a confusing one. I don't know if the cold's got it or whether, what I also suspect is, down here there's a couple of mouse holes. Could it be that one of them has actually burrowed into the roots, caused some damage to the plant, and then it's rotted through? It's a bit annoying, a bit frustrating when a plant that should in theory survive doesn't, especially when you've got others just meters away which come through. But sometimes that's life. It can happen with any plants, whether they're experimental or perfectly hardy. Not everything grows how you want it to grow. So again, it's a case of, if this was my only rostrata, I'd definitely be thinking, this isn't a hardy plant for me in my wet, cool winters. Whereas the ones just meters away, they've come through fine. So I'm not really saying that you need to buy 3 or 5 of every experimental plant you grow, but definitely once you've done your initial research and there's a reasonable amount of thought that that plant should survive where you are, it's worth maybe getting a couple, choosing the best places possible, putting the effort in to raise them up, give them good drainage, whatever your plant needs for long-term success. And then you do sort of have to stand back and wait for the inevitable to happen. Sometimes they'll absolutely flourish like that one there, other times they won't. And sometimes you get something in the middle. What I'm taking home this year is that we've probably had the wettest winter in recent years, and it's also been a winter peppered with cold. So in many senses, we've had the worst of both worlds. And if a lot of my plants, the vast majority, still look good, then really, for me, that is a win. So that's a quick look around some of the experimental, arid, Mediterranean style planting that I've got around my fire pit area. A little dose of reality. And I think with these plants, a lot of the time, especially when you're newer to this hobby, passion, obsession that is exotic gardening, it's easy just to go off the hardiness figures to see that something can take -8, -10, -15. When the reality is, particularly for plants that come from sunnier, hotter parts of the world, plants that prefer good drainage and don't need lots of rainfall, it really is our winter wet and the prolonged months of dark, cold, miserable mess that we get here in the UK that absolutely do them in. So if you're looking to grow some of these, and it really is important to keep them 100% pristine, if you do live somewhere that's colder in the northern part of the country, potentially overhead protection in winter might be the way forward. Potentially you could just focus on the hardier varieties. Yucca rostratas you've seen, most of them look really good, bar that one exception. Or maybe you could go even tougher still. Yucca gloriosa citrus twist, that euphorbia. There's plenty of really tough hardy plants that can definitely give that exotic Mediterranean vibe without any problems in winter. But if you're looking to grow any of these plants, the spiky plants, the succulent plants, those ones that look bluey, silvery, and you've got a feeling they come from hotter places, the best thing you can do is put the effort in before you plant them. Choose the best spot in your garden, ideally somewhere sheltered, definitely somewhere sunny. Good airflow really is important, and above all else, the best thing you can do, raise those plants up, dig in plenty of gravel. A lot of those plants will sit in pure gravel, and I think really that is the best thing you can do to improve the long-term chance of success. But let me know, if you grow any of these arid Mediterranean style plants in your garden, how have yours done following this winter? Have you had any casualties? Plants that should have survived far colder temperatures, but unfortunately the months and months of consistent, persistent rain have just done them in? Or have you had any surprise successes? Any agaves which in theory shouldn't be able to take a lot of cold, but have done really well for you this year? And let me know your plans going forward. If you've lost any, are you going to replace them? Would you consider putting overhead covers above all your plants? Or is it really important for you, rather than just for experimental reasons, but for visual, aesthetic ones, that you don't have shelter in your garden and you just want to have a real basis of tough, hardy plants, but don't need mollycoddling, protect anything like that? Because really for me, I fall somewhere in the middle. And I think looking at it as a general sort of group of plants, I am pretty happy. Considering the weather that we've had, most of them look fantastic. One Rostrata down, which might be down to rodent damage. The Phyllophora down, but I wasn't quite sure about that anyway. And one Agavia vatifolia down, which again, for me, up here in North Lincolnshire, was a little bit experimental. The Parrii should grow out the damage just fine, but overall, I am relatively happy with that. But anyway, I think I speak for us all when I say that we are absolutely welcoming now some beautiful sun and some spring warmth at last. It feels like it's been a long winter, even if it hasn't been the coldest. So thanks for watching. I hope this video has given you something. If you're looking to plant up an area with these plants this year, maybe it's given you a little bit of a reality check, or encouraged you to go the extra mile, to dig in that grit, to raise things up and do the absolute best you can. So thanks for watching. As always, if you've got any comments or questions, leave them in the section below. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.